You're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
As you
Good
know,
afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's customary to begin with an opening statement. Please feel free to do that.
Representative Wall and members of the committee, first of all, I'd like to thank Governor Rell for nominating me to my fourth term as a Superior Court judge. I'll be 38 next week. I started very young. I've been on the bench.
You're under oath, Your Honor. I just want to put that.
I've been on the bench a little over 24 years. I've been assigned primarily to criminal. I do the circuit about every 2 years, Bridgeport, Hartford, Waterbury, New Haven, and back around again. I've been doing Part A and Part B, presiding. I've enjoyed my work. I enjoyed serving the people of Connecticut. Look forward to another 8-year term. Any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Well, thanks, Judge, and congratulations again on your reappointment. And you are one of the judges who's really is as knowledgeable about the criminal justice system and its day-to-day functioning as anybody in the state, I think it's fair to say. And you heard some of the questions I asked Judge Alander just before you. I think your your vantage point on the system is a little different in as much as you spend as much time in the busier GA courts as you do in the JD courts where it's mostly trials. And do you have any information you think is appropriate to provide to us today about the impact of the budget crisis in the courtrooms that you're working in and the courthouses that you're working in?
Yeah, the last term I had was 5 years in New Haven, where I was in Part A and also Part B. I would do the Part A pre-trials from 9 to 11. And I go to the Part B court to do the overnight arraignments plus the motor vehicle docket because we were short a judge there. Marshals were severely short of. The first time I went to the arraignments in Elm Street Courthouse, they brought up 40 lockups. And the way the arraignments are in New Haven, you may have, on a Monday, you could have 80 to 100. 40 or 45 are held overnight. You may have 45 or 50 that are out on bond. The out on bonds, primarily domestic violence cases. One marshal brought them out, and they all sit down in row of folding chairs to the left of the bench. The first inmate was called up. He had no handcuffs on him. And I asked the marshal, where are the handcuffs? He said, we don't have enough handcuffs downstairs for the marshals, for the prisoners. I said, take them all back downstairs. And I talked to the chief marshal, and I said, get handcuffs, go to Home Depot if you have to. And I want 3 marshals in that courtroom, because I'm not going to put anyone's safety, the public personnel, at risk. Turns out they got the 3 marshals for me, but they had to take them off the vans to have them. So there's a shortage of marshals there. When I went to Waterbury...
So can I just to clarify,
Yep.
In that scenario you're originally describing, there was only one marshal in this entire courtroom, is that?
Yes.
And that's with 20 or 30 prisoners? And
prisoners, well, one marshal would lead them up from the downstairs, and he'd go back downstairs. We had one marshal there, and you had, say, 30 or 40 people over here. You've got maybe 40, 50 people in the audience, and you have the personnel to the right and the bench in front of you where people appear before you. And, you need a marshal who's at the bench with the prisoner. Another marshal stays by where the prisoners are sitting. Another marshal has to keep track of what's going on in the gallery of the public who's just sitting there. In Waterbury, I went there this September. Chief Marshal Candido told me there were 17 marshals down, and now I, again, combined A and B together, and I had 2 marshals in that court when I was doing the arraignments, and a person in the audience was acting up, and I took a recess, and I said I wanted a 3rd marshal standing in the back of the wall to watch what's going on with people there. So they're short. Interpreters, we have 1 interpreter sometimes covering 3 different courtrooms. You call a Spanish-speaking defendant to the bench, you have to wait for an interpreter to get there. So the budget cuts have directly impacted the criminal justice system, and in the way we operate, we're performing a service for the public, and without the proper funds, we can't do it. We are doing the best we can, and we are doing the work, though.
in terms of just public safety, I can remember in the good old days that the first court you were describing was the court I used to work in as a prosecutor on Elm Street, and more than a few times, defendants came over the bench after the judges or after the prosecutors and had to be tackled by these marshals. And
came after Judge Iannotti, I think, once, and Judge O'Keefe, I think, had a punch when he was going over the bench to get Judge O'Keefe. But we're getting a lot older these days. We can't run that fast.
Well, and the point is, I remember when I used to work there as a prosecutor, there was at least 4, 5, 6, 7, at the time, special deputy sheriffs in the room, plus a couple of New Haven police officers,
Yes.
typically during the arraignments, and I just can't imagine going, because, I mean, that, after all, is at the moment when people are, the people have just been arrested, they may still be intoxicated, they're very upset, this is, if something bad is going to happen, this would be the moment, and it's just scary to think that there's only 1 or 2 security people in the courtroom at that moment. And plus, you know, when Judge Quinn was here earlier this year, she said that I think there was a new class of marshals that have been brought on board since last July 1st, and I guess one of the things that's being contemplated if the rescissions continue to play out is to lay off all of the people who have been hired since July 1st, because those employees are not protected by the special agreement that was entered into by the governor to no layoffs, but that only applied to people hired prior to July 1st, 2009. So it seems like this is a very serious issue for us to contend with.
If they were laid off, it would only exacerbate the entire problem, sir.
You heard me ask earlier about the issue of resources that are available to judges and prosecutors in terms of sentencing and supervision, probation, bail commissioner supervision, halfway house beds, day reporting centers, et cetera, et cetera. Do the budget cuts seem like they're having an impact on that, or does that seem like it's adequately funded at the moment?
For the moment, the thing is you have to push to find something. Now, I saw in the paper, I guess last week, regarding domestic violence, we're talking about GPSs. Now, I've used that in 3 domestic violence cases in the past couple of months. And the thing is, they have them. You make the defendant pay for it. It's saying it's $335 a month they have to pay. Halfway houses, I mean, the beds are full. So you get a person, what they call a jail re-interview. The person needs treatment for either alcohol, drugs, or dual diagnosis, whatever. You're going to go on a waiting list. It could be 4, 6, 8 weeks before a bed becomes available. And if a person leaves that bed and now is brought back on a failure to appear, the person doesn't really belong in jail. But beds are very precious. He or she had his shot at the bed. You don't give him a second shot. So the beds are full. We keep people in jail awaiting a bed to go to. As far as resources, I think that someone mentioned raise the age before. We had a large hole in our criminal justice system for 16 and 17-year-olds. No place to go. I had to keep one girl in jail for 4 months till she turned 18 so we could place her someplace. So raise the age, I think, is a very good thing. The only problem is funding for it.
Right. You mentioned the GPS issue as it relates to domestic violence, family violence cases, and just picking your brain on this one, because some people have raised the issue of maybe we should expand the use of GPS for the supervision of people who are either have domestic violence cases pending or who have been convicted in those types of cases. But my understanding was you could do that now, assuming the resources are there and under the law, right? You can require that as a condition of release. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
And you said, I think you said you've done that 3 different times.
One I started out pre-conviction, and I kept them on as a condition of probation because both parties were kind of at fault as far as things go. She would make complaints about him being at her house, and I said, it's for your own protection. But he pays the $335 a month, and the other 2 I did were pretrial. One person violated a protective order, and the bond was raised in Bantam Court to $100,000. He went to the Yale Psychiatric Unit. After that, he made the bond. Then the prosecutor in Waterbury wanted to raise his bond again for violating our condition of release, for violating the protective order. We had a bond argument, and he agreed to stay out of the 2 towns where his wife worked and lived. We put a GPS on him also at the cost of $335, but he's bearing that cost.
Okay. In terms of the caseload, I think we saw some big picture statistics recently. It's just, and I was a little bit surprised, the actual number of cases coming into the criminal courts has actually declined over the past 20 years, which surprised me. Apparently the caseloads are a lot higher in the early 90s than they are today. But there's another statistic that shows the number of pending cases has actually gone up. So there's fewer cases coming in the door, but apparently it's taking longer to resolve, especially in the busy GA courts, some of the urban courts.